Tonight, crisis mode. The president at NATO headquarters in Europe holding emergency meetings with the transatlantic alliance. As Russia's war on Ukraine stalls, President Vladimir Putin increasingly waging a war of attrition.
Russia's forces have destroyed apartment buildings, schools, hospitals.
And High Court on the horizon. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson closes in on the Marble Palace. Plus, the state of the economy as jobless claims hit a historic new low. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Ukrainian forces remain in control of key cities as the Russian invasion enters its second month. Good evening in Washington, D.C. I'm Jenna Browder, along with John Jessup.
Thanks for joining us. The Russian-backed war has captured the world's attention. And while Vladimir Putin and Russian forces continue their advance, nations from around the globe have slapped sanctions on Russia. Still, the death and destruction continue.
One of the hardest hit areas, the port city of Mariupol. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the city has been reduced to ashes after relentless Russian missile attacks, including against a maternity hospital and a theater where civilians were seeking shelter. Experts warned that what's taking place in Mariupol is a sign of what's to come in other Ukrainian cities.
Even if Mariupol falls, Ukraine cannot be conquered city by city, street by street, house by house. The only outcome to all these is more suffering, more destruction, and more horror as far as the eye can see. The Ukrainian people are enduring a living hell.
The United Nations says at least 1,000 civilians have been killed in Ukraine this past month, a number that's actually believed to be much higher.
With seemingly no end in sight to the devastation in Ukraine, world leaders grapple with how to resolve the deadly conflict.
As Gary Lane reports, President Biden is in Europe tonight holding high-level meetings aimed at holding Putin accountable.
President Biden traveled to Brussels to promote a united NATO front, hoping to convince America's European allies to take tougher action against Russia.
Putin was banking on NATO being split. NATO has never been more united than it is today. Putin is getting exactly the opposite what he intended to have as a consequence of going into Ukraine.
Biden announced another round of tough sanctions against Russia, this time targeting 48 state-owned defense companies, 328 Russian lawmakers, and dozens of Russian elites.
Well, this is not something that Poland or Romania or Germany should carry on their own. This is an international responsibility. The United States, as a leader, one of the leaders in the international community, has an obligation to be engaged and do all we can to ease the suffering and pain of innocent women and children and men, for that matter.
The president also pledged another $1 billion in humanitarian aid and $500 million in military assistance to Ukraine. During Ukrainian President Zelensky's address to NATO, however, he said it's not enough and asked again for fighter jets and tanks to save his people and their cities. You have thousands of fighter jets, but we haven't been given one yet, said Zelensky. You have at least 20,000 tanks. Ukraine asked for 1% of all your tanks. Give to us or sell to us. Stopping short of promising jets and tanks, NATO pledged to increase troop levels in Eastern Europe and send Ukraine more drones and anti-tank weapons. Also, detection and medical equipment will be provided to protect against possible Russian unleashing of biological, chemical, radiological, or nuclear weapons. Additional punitive actions are coming from the Group of 7 industrialized nations. G7 leaders announced they'll be restricting Russia's central bank from using gold for transactions. The leaders are also concerned about the massive influx of more than 3 million refugees into Europe. President Biden said the U.S. will help take in 100,000. NATO members are also expressing growing concern about Russian war crimes. Zelensky now accuses Russia of using phosphorus bombs against the Ukrainian people. President Biden's characterization of Vladimir Putin as a war criminal has caused Russia to threaten to cut off diplomatic relations with the United States. And that action would be unprecedented. The official severing of ties between the two countries has not taken place since formal relations were first established in 1809. Gary Lane, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Gary, very much. In other news tonight, confirmation hearings for Supreme Court nominee Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson wrapped up today. The Judiciary Committee now preparing for an early April vote on whether to advance her nomination.
After 2 days of direct questions and answers, Jackson got a break while outside experts weighed in on her professional merits. Caitlin Burke has been following the confirmation hearings. Caitlin, you say there was a bit of a role reversal today between the bitter exchange from the lawmakers to the witness stand?
Yeah, we saw some tense moments today, specifically between Democrats and witnesses called by Republicans. One line of questioning even getting into January 6th.
Have you offered any testimony to the January 6th Commission?
Have not been asked.
Is Joseph R. Biden of Delaware the duly elected and lawfully serving President of the United States of America?
He is the President of this country.
In questioning Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall, Senator Whitehouse also accused him of taking part in robocalls promoting the January 6th march on the Capitol. Marshall deferred all questions on the topic. When it came to the other outside witnesses, their testimony represented the clashing views of Judge Jackson already presented by Democrat and Republican lawmakers.
Senators this week quoted Dr. King. And as I am reminded to paraphrase, King said, "Give us the ballot so we could put judges on the bench who will do justice and love mercy." Judge Jackson will do exactly that.
Ultimately, we cannot expect someone who subscribes to critical race theory to defend and protect the Constitution, because CRT asserts that the Constitution is not worth defending.
More friendly witnesses included a childhood friend of Jackson, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, and the president of NOBLE, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives.
So there have been charges made yesterday, day before, even this morning, that she is somehow part of a, quote, anti-incarceration, anti-police movement, that somehow she is affiliated with a defund the police movement. Would you or your organization have endorsed her if that were true?
We never saw that in our research. That never came out. And I don't really think it's true, sir.
From the other side, witnesses included Eleanor McCullen, the plaintiff in a free speech case tried by Judge Jackson, and Alessandra Serrano, the chief legal officer for an organization working to end child trafficking.
How did it make you feel in Judge Jackson's brief when she referred to pro-life women as hostile, noisy crowd of in-your-face protesters?
Well, as I said, it made me very sad, extremely sad, and that's not the case at all.
The American Bar Association participated in the peer review portion of the confirmation process. ABA's standing committee defended the well-qualified rating the group gave Judge Jackson.
Now, with confirmation hearings wrapped and a committee vote scheduled for April 4th, Senate leaders expect a full vote to follow in, quote, short order. John and Jenna?
All right, Caitlin Burke, thank you very much. And for more, let's bring in CBN News chief political analyst David Brody. So, David, Judge Jackson not in the room today for this portion of the hearing. From what you saw, did any of today's testimony move the needle at all?
No, not at all. And typically this is a day where all these outside experts are testifying, and it really never moves the needle at all. What would have moved the needle, if anything, would have been those first couple days that she was testifying. And look, she's on a glide path at this point. I think the real question is which Republicans, if any, will vote with Democrats. But let's just say, for example, no Republicans vote. It's 50 votes. And then you've got Vice President Kamala Harris, the border czar, in the chair, and that'll be it. So there's no reason that Manchin or Sinema, there's no reason to believe that either one are going to vote against her. So she will be confirmed at this point. No reason to believe she won't.
David, how do you think some of the accusations of her being soft on crime or endorsing thoughts like CRT, do you think those will stick as both the right and the left either fight, support, or oppose her nomination?
Well, that's a good question, John. And when you say stick, it just depends on what the timetable is. If you mean stick as it relates to this potential red wave coming, the 2022 midterm elections, the contours of the political dynamics, yes, I think they will stick. Will they stick this week? Will it make a difference in terms of her being on the court or not being on the court? No, I don't think it will. So I just think it depends. But clearly that was Republicans' goal all along, to bring up critical race theory, to bring up the soft on crime and the child pornography, lighter sentences and all of that. And I think it worked. I think it worked very, very well. But the problem is you're in such a divided United States of America that you're just not going to budge any Democrats at this point. And look, the Republicans made Democrats out to look soft on crime. And I mean, she couldn't even define what a woman is. And that type of stuff will stick to Democrats as they play through this politically as the midterms come to fruition. I love that word, fruition. It's a very underrated word, by the way.
It's a good word. David, mostly calm under pressure. Jackson did allow her emotions to show through a bit when Senator Cory Booker talked about the historic nature of her nomination. Talk a little bit about that. What would it mean for the United States to have its first black woman Supreme Court justice?
Well, sure. I mean, stepping back at it, kind of looking at the arc of history, it will obviously be historic. It'll be a big deal in the annals of history. Having said that, shall we go back to history when in 2005, Joe Biden told George W. Bush, if you ever nominate Janice Rogers Brown, a black woman, to the United States Supreme Court, he, Joe Biden, will filibuster Janice Rogers Brown. So look, the Democrats can talk till they're blue in the face about this being a historic moment and Joe Biden was the president that did it. Fine, that's what the record will reflect, but the record will also reflect the fact that, 15, 20, almost a little less than 20 years ago, Joe Biden actually wanted to filibuster the first black woman that could have been on the Supreme Court 17 years ago today.
David, thank you so much for your time.
You bet.
Thanks, David. Unemployment, inflation, and all things economy. Next on Faith Nation. Welcome back. In economic news tonight, new unemployment applications are at their lowest point, not just of the pandemic, but of the last 52 years. Numbers from the Labor Department showing 187,000 people applied for new jobless claims last week. The last time applications were that low was back in 1969. More than 1.3 million people submitted continuing claims. That's the lowest level since 1970.
And here with us now, Ted Rossman, a senior industry analyst with Bankrate.com. Ted, welcome. Let's start with the numbers there. Unquestionably good news on the unemployment front, though Fed Chairman Jerome Powell just recently warned of an unhealthy jobs market. Help us make sense of that. With numbers like the ones we just heard from Jenna, how are we talking about an unhealthy jobs market?
Yeah, what Chair Powell is talking about is it's unhealthy how tight the labor market is right now. It's really hard for companies to find workers. In fact, there are 1.7 job openings for every one person looking for work. And this is putting a lot of strain on employers trying to find people, and they're having to pay more. So it's actually really good news for workers themselves. A lot of workers have a lot of bargaining power these days. It's good to see wages going up. The thing that we worry about, though, is does that feed into some of this inflation that we're seeing?
Yeah. According to the Urban Institute, wage increases aren't keeping up with the rising costs of everyday essentials like gas, groceries, things of that sort. How can Americans keep up with these high prices?
The Fed definitely needs to get inflation under control. And in fact, they have this dual mandate to promote employment and stable prices. The box is definitely checked on employment. The labor market is doing quite well. Inflation, there's obviously a lot more that needs to be done. It sounds like the Fed's probably going to raise interest rates by 0.5 percentage point at its next meeting in early May, and then probably another 0.5 percentage point in June. So hopefully that will help. In the meantime, it's tough for households because, yeah, even though wages are up 5% over the past year, if inflation is up 8%, which is what we're seeing, you're still upside down. So a lot of people are delaying certain purchases to afford others. They may be cutting into savings, taking on debt. A lot of people are also getting really aggressive about coupon strategies, seeking out buy nothing groups on Facebook and other forums. People are getting creative.
Ted, real quickly here, do you foresee prices coming down anytime in the near future?
Unfortunately, it looks like inflation is with us for a while still, as in at least several more months of higher gas prices, The housing market's been hot. Rising interest rates will probably tamp this down a bit, but it's going to take some time to really see the impacts.
All right, Ted Rossman with Bankrate.com. Good to have you on with us tonight. Thank you for your insights.
Thanks, Ted. Well, the bombs are falling, but not everyone is fleeing. Meet the missionaries who are working to serve the people of Ukraine next on Faith Nation.
Well, 1 month ago, war came to Ukraine, leading millions to flee the country for other parts of Europe. But some made the decision to stay and to serve.
That's right. As CBN senior international correspondent George Thomas reports from Kyiv, a small group of missionaries has become a lifeline for thousands of desperate people in need of food, encouragement, and human companionship.
When war started and Russian bombs began falling on Kyiv,
we had our bags packed because it's just like you're in a rush and there's a new situation. Out of a sudden in the morning you wake up and you hear the sound of bombs. So you're like in a rush and you're like, whoa, like what is happening?
Marie and Jafin had to make a decision whether to leave the capital.
It was not an easy decision, but until we prayed. But once we prayed, it was a very easy decision.
Jafin is from India. His wife, Marie, is German. Both missionaries to Ukraine with the group Youth with a Mission.
Growing up in India and also doing ministry in India, this was not my first time being in a dangerous situation. In fact, this is the third time.
They decided to stay because of a commitment to serve the people here, despite the very real danger to their lives.
We also committed to marriage, staying in good and in bad times. We are not only here trying to make an impact when times are favorable, but especially when things go really bad and when people are leaving. This is the time when we actually need to stay.
This is the heart of Kyiv. It's popularly known as Maidan. And today, it is a fortress, concrete slabs, sandbags, and these metal structures are aimed at stopping Russian tanks. Today, half the city has already evacuated. And for folks at YWAM Kyiv, it's all about ministering to those who are still in the city.
30 minutes south of Maidan.
I'm from Germany.
I'm from Germany.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jafin and Marie sprung into action, turning the sprawling YWAM campus into a humanitarian aid hub.
And they're just dropping all of these things here. So our job is to sort all these things out so it looks chaotic.
Natalia Turbina and her two sons work in the kitchen, making meals for the folks in the neighborhood.
It depends on the day. Sometimes there are days when we cook for 1,000 people, sometimes 500 or 600.
Wow, look at you peel. You are like a peeling machine. Wow, look at how fast she's peeling those potatoes. Wow.
The only thought that gave me peace was to go back to Ukraine. So that's why I'm here. Okay, and while I talk, I try to keep my eye on the 19A.
Katarina, also a YWAM missionary here, is from Finland.
I'm not saying that God was the one who forced me to go to the war zone, or that it was somehow like I didn't have a choice. I had a choice. That was my choice. My choice was to come here, and God opened the door. Vysičas doma.
She evacuated just before war started, but returned days later.
Wait, we're walking up 12 flights of stairs?
Yeah.
Got it.
Now Katerina hits the streets of Kyiv delivering food and other aid supplies to those unable to leave their apartments.
Thank you for how much you love her.
Each visit ending with time of prayer.
That's okay, I don't know Ukrainian either.
While Katerina makes her daily deliveries, David Selsky, who normally handles maintenance on the YWAM campus, is making dangerous missions to evacuate people trapped behind Russian lines.
Every time when I go to these areas, I prepare myself that I might not get out of there. I pray every time. I'm not counting, but I've evacuated more than 100 people. I just work and work as long as I can, and as long as God allows me to help.
In another part of campus, Yulia Kentz, who has been with YWAM for 5 years, is on the phone taking orders from a nearby neonatal hospital. Almost every other day, YWAM campuses in Germany and other European countries are shipping medical supplies to Kyiv for distribution. Ken's daily prayer is that God will sow confusion among Russian forces trying to encircle her capital.
There is this very good saying that if Russia will put down their weapons, there's going to be no war. But if Ukraine will put down their weapons, there's going to be no Ukraine. And this is so true.
When they're not handling day-to-day logistics or sorting through all the supplies coming in from around the world, Jafine and Marie visit elderly homes, bringing food and lots of warm hugs.
We are so bored, but the time flies when you are here. It is so tender. It is something for the soul. It is so pleasant. It is wonderful.
For Jafine, Marie, and others at YWAM, ministering in Ukraine's war zone is ultimately about fulfilling a commitment to serve.
I think it's not so much about handing out food packages now or like cooking meals or like distributing some humanitarian aid. That is not the main thing that God has been preparing me for, because everybody can do that. But the hard thing to do is to do it while you hear the shelling of bombs and while you see continuously on the news how in your city, not far away from you, a building is burning and people are dying. But I just do it because of love for the country and because of commitment to saying I'm not stepping away. And then if I feed 2 people or if I help to feed 1,000 people a day, maybe in my heart it doesn't make a difference because my commitment to God is just the same.
George Thomas, CBN News, Kyiv, Ukraine.
Tremendous commitment making a big difference. Coming up, channeling tragic heartbreak into art for the people of Ukraine. Finally tonight, an exchange student from Ukraine is using her art as an outlet for hope during the Russian invasion.
16-year-old Dania Zubravia is currently living in Minnesota, but she's from the destroyed city of Mariupol. Over the last month, she's been creating and selling her art to help raise money for Ukraine. So far, she's raised $10,000. Money, she says, will be spent on food, medicine, and other much-needed supplies.
It's amazing, Jenna, to see how people are using whatever they have, the tools in their hands, what's in their heart to try to help the people who are devastated in Ukraine.
Yeah, and there's a groundswell of support, almost a grassroots movement.
Well, thanks for watching Faith Nation.
Have a great night.